On a damp autumn evening in a sprawling Midwestern suburb, Officer Benjamin Ben Keller patrolled the quiet streets in his well-worn patrol car. The rhythmic patter of rain on the windshield, mixed with the muted glow of streetlights reflecting off wet asphalt, lent an eerie quality to the night. Though the neighborhood boasted a reputation for its quiet stability, beneath its serene surface lurked undercurrents of tension, a tension Ben had seen in subtle glances and hurried whispers during his years on the force. Ben's shift had been uneventful up until that moment when his trained eyes caught a slight anomaly. A dark sedan idling near an intersection with its headlights off, the vehicle's brake lights pulsing in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The car's driver, an African-American man in his late 40s with a calm, unreadable expression, sat perfectly still. His posture was relaxed, yet his eyes conveyed a depth of assurance that unsettled Ben. Although nothing in the car's movement or appearance overtly violated any law, Ben's instincts, honed by years of enforcing the rules in a system riddled with biases, urged him to act. Activating his flashing lights and siren, Ben signaled the driver to pull over. The sedan coasted gently to the side of the road near a dimly lit gas station. Ben parked his cruiser behind the car, the sound of rain and the distant hum of city life setting a somber stage. With measured steps, he walked toward the vehicle, his leather boots squeaking on the wet pavement. Every sense was on high alert. Every instinct screamed that something was amiss. "Good evening," Ben said, his tone authoritative as he tapped lightly on the driver's window. The glass slid down with a soft hiss, revealing a man who met Ben's gaze steadily. The man's eyes, dark and unwavering, held no trace of fear, only a cool composure that bordered on defiance. "Evening, officer," the man replied evenly, his voice calm and clear. There was a subtle inflection in his tone, as though he were accustomed to questions that carry hidden assumptions. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Ben demanded, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized the man's face for any sign of deceit or nervousness. The driver reached into the center console and handed over his documents without hesitation, as if he were reciting a well-rehearsed script. Ben's gloved fingers rifled through the papers, noting the driver's name, Marcus Ellison. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Ben asked, his tone laced with a hint of suspicion. "Your headlights are out, and that's a safety hazard." Marcus' eyes softened into what might have been an apologetic smile. "I was aware, officer. I've been meaning to get them fixed, but time hasn't been on my side lately," he explained, his voice steady and unruffled. Ben's gaze hardened. "That may be, but you're still driving with a known defect. You understand that's a violation of the law." He paused, deliberately watching Marcus' reaction, as if trying to catch a glimpse of guilt. Instead, Marcus's face remained an impenetrable mask of calm, the only movement being the slight adjustment of his grip on the steering wheel. Minutes passed in a thick, tense silence. The drizzle intensified, the rain now blurring the neon reflections in puddles on the street. Ben's eyes flicked back and forth between Marcus and the documents, his mind churning with a mixture of duty and a personal need to assert control, a control that felt increasingly threatened by the serene composure before him. "Where are you headed tonight?" Ben asked suddenly, leaning in as if the proximity might force an answer. Marcus hesitated only a moment before replying, "I'm on my way home, officer." "Home, huh? And which part of town is that?" Ben's tone sharpened, laced with an edge that implied he already suspected more than just a broken headlight. Marcus met his inquiry with a cool steadiness. "Not far from here. I live in the East End." Ben's eyes narrowed as he considered the answer. There was something about Marcus of measured cadence that irked him, something that suggested this encounter was not as routine as it appeared. His instincts whispered that Marcus was no ordinary motorist, and that underestimating him might be his first misstep of the night. With a final glance at Marcus, Ben stepped back to his cruiser, leaving the car idling as he resolved to conduct a more thorough investigation of the vehicle. The night held its breath, and the rain continued to fall, cloaking the unfolding drama in a veil of uncertainty. As the minutes crawled by, the tension in the air grew nearly palpable. Ben circled the sedan, eyes scanning every inch of the vehicle. The interior was neat, almost too immaculate for a car that had been driven daily on the rough streets of the city. Marcus' calm presence contrasted sharply with Ben's escalating irritation. In his mind, the driver's unhurried composure was a direct challenge to his authority, a defiant refusal to play the part of the frightened suspect. Ben's thoughts turned darker, fueled by years of ingrained biases and the unspoken belief that his badge granted him unquestionable authority. "You think you're above the law, don't you?" he muttered under his breath. His hand moved to his belt, fingers brushing the cold metal of his holster, as if the weight of his weapon would remind him of the power he wielded. Unable to tolerate what he saw as insolence, Ben stepped forward abruptly. "Step out of the vehicle," he commanded sharply, his tone brooking no argument. Marcus' eyes flickered momentarily, but his expression remained impassive. "Why must I?" Marcus asked calmly, his voice carrying an undercurrent of controlled defiance. "I haven't done anything wrong." Ben's jaw clenched. "Because you're not cooperating. I'm giving you an order," he said, his tone rising. "You're testing my patience." Marcus's gaze did not waver. "Officer, I assure you I'm not resisting. I merely request clarity regarding this stop." His measured reply seemed to mock Ben's escalating aggression. Frustration boiled within Ben. In a rash decision fueled by both anger and a misplaced sense of superiority, he produced a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "You leave me no choice," he growled. "I'm placing you under arrest for obstruction and resisting law enforcement." The words struck Marcus like a challenge, yet he did not recoil. Instead, his eyes held a calm, steely resolve. "Officer, you have no legal grounds for this," he stated, his tone rising imperceptibly as he maintained eye contact. "I have complied with every order you've given." Ben's face flushed as his grip tightened on Marcus's arm. In that moment, the routine stop had twisted into a power struggle, a test of wills that Ben was determined to win at any cost. "You're making a mistake," Ben spat, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can question my authority?" Marcus' response was measured, each word deliberate. "I am simply stating the facts, officer. Perhaps you should also consider whether your actions are justified." His calm only fueled Ben's fury. With a sudden motion, Ben began a rough search of Marcus' person, his hand probing unnecessarily as if to prove that he could break down the composure before him. "I don't care what you think," he snarled. "Your silence is only going to make this harder." Marcus remained silent, his eyes never leaving Ben's, as if silently daring him to push further. Then, as if deciding that words were now needed, Marcus spoke in a tone that was both measured and chillingly calm. "You're not in control here, officer." At that moment, the crackle of Ben's radio broke the oppressive silence. "Unit 19, come in," a dispatcher's voice said, causing Ben to jerk his attention away from Marcus for a split second. The sound of distant footsteps and the flashing lights of another patrol car approaching further intensified the atmosphere. Ben's heart pounded in his chest as he realized that the situation was spiraling far beyond a simple traffic violation. Before Ben could regain his composure, Marcus's voice cut through once again. "Officer Keller, do you understand what you're doing?" he asked, his tone now laced with an authority that belied the calm exterior. "Do you realize you're committing an abuse of power?" Ben faltered, his earlier bravado evaporating as Marcus' words sank in. His mind raced, his pulse quickening as the gravity of the situation began to dawn on him. In the heated moment, his fingers trembled around the cuffs, the irony of the situation not lost on him. A man he had wrongfully detained now questioned the very legitimacy of his authority. "Turn your body cam on," Marcus demanded coolly, stepping closer. "I want a record of this. How many times have you done this before? How many lives have you upset with that badge you so cherish?" The words hit Ben like a physical blow. His voice wavered as he stuttered. I have nothing to," but before he could complete his thought, a new voice arrived on the radio. "Officer Keller, this is dispatch. Please respond. What is your suspect's identification?" Ben's face paled as he heard the dispatcher's voice. His mind scrambled to recall any detail that might justify his actions. But as the seconds ticked by, he knew he was already in too deep, a miscalculation that could cost him not just his career, but his freedom. Marcus' eyes shone with an unsettling certainty as he continued, "I think it's time you learned who you're dealing with." The chill in his tone sent shivers down Ben's spine, even as the rain continued to wash away any remnants of hope on the slick pavement. The night had grown colder, the rain heavier, as if nature itself were mourning the injustice unfolding on the deserted street. Ben stood rigidly beside the black sit-in, sweat mingling with the rain on his forehead as he fumbled for a coherent response. The radio's dispatch crackled repeatedly, each burst a reminder of the inevitable reckoning coming his way. Marcus's voice, calm yet unyielding, broke the silence once more. "Officer Keller, I am not just any citizen," he declared. In that moment, he reached into his jacket and, with deliberate care, produced a badge. But this was no ordinary police badge. It was the emblem of the Internal Investigations Bureau, a symbol of oversight and accountability that struck at the heart of Ben's misguided authority. Ben's face went ashen. His voice, once so forceful, now faltered as he tried to find an excuse. I didn't know. I was just following orders." His words tumbled out in a stutter, each syllable betraying the realization that his power had been nothing more than an illusion. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Ben's. "Following orders?" he echoed softly, the irony thick in the air. "What if I told you that your orders are under investigation? What if your actions tonight are not only unjustified, but are also a violation of every principle this department claims to uphold?" The words hung in the air as Ben's hand shook slightly, his attempt to assert control crumbling in the face of this revelation. A second patrol car pulled up, its lights flashing in the rain, and an officer stepped out, a young woman whose face bore the marks of both determination and disappointment. Her eyes quickly assessed the scene, and she moved toward Ben, her presence a silent condemnation of his actions. "Officer Keller, you're coming with me," she said firmly, her tone brooking no argument. "We need to review your body cam footage immediately." The words were not so much a command as they were an inevitability. Ben's heart pounded in his chest as the full weight of his error crashed down on him. His badge, the symbol he clung to for authority, now seemed like a chain around his neck, binding him to a future of hearings, investigations, and public disgrace. Every moment of this night, every unjust act fueled by arrogance and bias, now stood exposed under the unflinching gaze of accountability. Marcus watched silently as Ben was led away, the rain washing away the last vestiges of the officer's former self. With a calm yet resolute tone, he addressed the small gathering that had begun to form, a few onlookers, a fellow officer, and even the dispatcher on the radio, their voices blending into a chorus of muted shock and disappointment. "Do you understand," Marcus said quietly, "that a badge does not make you invincible? It does not grant you the right to abuse power. It only makes you accountable for every action you take." His words resonated in the cold night air, a final indictment of the arrogance that had brought Ben to this moment. As the young officer secured the scene and prepared to transport Ben to a holding area, Marcus took one last look at the slick, rain-soaked street. In the distance, the flashing lights of other patrol cars and the murmurs of gathered witnesses bore silent testimony to the collapse of a man who had once believed himself untouchable. In a low, reflective tone, Marcus whispered, "Today you got lucky. But remember, what if I hadn't been who I am?" His final words echoed in the night, a chilling reminder of the fragile line between authority and accountability. The rain continued to fall, indifferent to the turmoil below, as the events of the night began to ripple outward, sparking an internal investigation, public outcry, and a long, painful reckoning with systemic abuses of power. For Ben Keller, the night marked not just the end of a routine stop, but the beginning of a downward spiral from which there might be no redemption. And in that somber moment, justice, though slow and often harsh, had finally made its presence known.